Joe Biden's efforts to bring down tensions in the escalating war between Israel and Hamas faced massive setbacks even before he departed for West Asia. Jordan called off the U.S. president's planned summit with Arab leaders after a deadly explosion at a Gaza hospital killed hundreds. The postponement of the Amman summit comes after Palestinian leader Mahmoud Abbas withdrew from the scheduled meetings in protest of the attacks. The Hamas-run health ministry in Gaza blamed an Israeli airstrike. The Israeli military said it had no involvement and pinned the blame on a misfired Palestinian rocket. Jordan's foreign minister said, I'm quoting here, "This war and this aggression are pushing the region to the brink." He stated Jordan would only host the summit when all participants agreed on its proposal, which would be to stop the war and respect the humanity of Palestinians. In the air, Biden released a statement saying he was outraged, deeply saddened by the explosion in the hospital and the terrible loss of life that resulted. He said he spoke immediately after hearing the news with King Abdullah II of Jordan and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Biden added he has directed his national security team to continue gathering information about what exactly happened. The cancellation of the Jordan leg of the trip reflects an increasingly volatile situation that will test the limits of American influence in the region. Here's why the Jordan summit was crucial for the U.S. president. The Israel-Palestinian conflict has been going on for decades, and to a large extent, it's involved the same cadre of leaders. Netanyahu is the longest-serving prime minister in Israeli history. Abbas has been the Palestinian president for nearly 20 years. King Abdullah II has been king since 1999. Biden has called the Jordanian king a loyal ally in a tough neighborhood. Al-Sisi is the newest leader, president of Egypt since 2014. Furious protesters tried to storm the Israeli embassy in Amman, where Biden was due to meet Arab leaders. Lebanon's Iran-backed Hezbollah called for a day of rage over the strike to coincide with Biden's arrival. It fueled fears of the very escalation by Tehran and its allies that the U.S. president's visit is supposed to warn against. Tear gas fired near U.S. embassy in Lebanon at protesters. Hundreds of angry protesters gathered outside the French embassy in Tunisia on Tuesday, also denouncing the United States. In Iraq, scores of protesters gathered near Baghdad's Green Zone following the Gaza Hospital blast. Hundreds in the Iranian capital of Tehran protested against Israel outside French and UK embassies. Apart from funding Hamas, Israel's arch foe backs Hezbollah in Lebanon. French President Emmanuel Macron said nothing can justify targeting civilians and called for humanitarian access without delay. Qatar's foreign ministry called the hospital strike a dangerous escalation in the course of confrontations. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan condemned the incident as the latest example of Israeli attacks devoid of the most basic human values. The UN human rights chief, Volker Turk, called the hospital strike totally unacceptable, insisting that the perpetrators must be held to account. Russia and the United Arab Emirates have called for an emergency UN Security Council meeting. European Union's Charles Michel said that targeting civilians' infrastructure in Gaza breaks international law. The African Union chief, Moussa Faki Mahamat, accused Israel of a war crime following the deadly strike. The World Health Organization condemned the deadly strike and demanded the immediate protection of civilians and health care in the Gaza Strip. Now, for more on this, we're being joined by Glenn Carl from Boston. Mr. Carl is a former national intelligence officer from the CIA and national security and foreign policy expert. So thank you so much for joining us on WION.
Thank you.
So, in light of the shocking incident at the Gaza hospital, we've seen visuals of human suffering. The blame game seems to have begun. The IDF is denying any role in this. What's your assessment?
Well, it would be a catastrophe. It is a catastrophe for Israel and for the IDF to do anything like this. So there's no reason that they would do that intentionally. I also think that their record of admitting grudgingly, but admitting and stating accurate information is quite consistent. So I think it's inconceivable that Israel did it intentionally. It is conceivable that it was an error, But since there are videos and the strong statement that by Israel that they didn't do it, I think that that is, in fact, probably the case. I think it's possible that, as Israel said, it was an errant missile or missiles from either the Islamic Jihad or Hamas. But we don't know that. Whatever the origin of the missiles, it's a catastrophe for the victims, for Israel, and obviously has inflamed all of the Muslim world.
Absolutely, and we've seen reactions and condemnation pour in from across the globe. We're going to perhaps see a shift here, that Israel may be on the back foot after the Gaza Hospital massacre. Do you think that's true?
Well, I think the prospect of an Israeli invasion of Gaza has, from the very beginning, been an extremely dangerous prospect for Israel, because Hamas is not, all 2.5 million Palestinians in the Gaza Strip are not members of Hamas. And obviously, we've seen that 1 million of them are now refugees, have been forced from their homes, are enduring tremendous hardship. And none of this helps Israel at all, really. They have, Israel, an almost impossible task if their objective is to root out and destroy Hamas in Gaza. The military can't address, ideally, what is in part a political and social issue.
Also, U.S. President Joe Biden's fraught trip to West Asia, it was already a very high-stakes visit. What are his options now? Would you say that a peace deal is now out of question?
Well, I would have been flabbergasted, although thrilled, if a peace deal were to come from President Biden's trip. I haven't thought that that is very likely at all. In the absence of, I'm not in the White House now, but it seems clear to me that President Biden's objective is to keep the crisis from spinning out of control and becoming a regional war. To dissuade Hezbollah and Iran from encouraging Hezbollah to widen the war, to try to temper the Israelis' intended actions in Gaza, and perhaps to bring Arab Muslim states more actively involved in finding some way to stop a regional war from occurring, help the Palestinians, and dissuade Hamas from acting further. But those are all tall orders. But the very fact of his going, I think, is dissuasive to a certain extent, at least, towards Iran and Hamas as our two aircraft carriers by the United States in the Eastern Mediterranean. And I think that is the primary objective. The others would be wonderful, but are progressively unlikely given the disaster with the hospital.
All right. Well, Mr. Karl, thank you so much for joining us on WION with your expertise and your perspective on this.
Anytime.